Hey, I'm here to tell you about a project I've been working on called Terminalwire, a drop-in command line interface for web apps. If you're familiar with Hotwire, it's HTML over the wire, and it's a way of building web applications where you don't need an API and a ton of JavaScript. So I've done the same thing for command line apps. You don't need an API, and you get to use whatever command line parsing interface you want on your server. Before we jump into that, though, let's look at what it takes today if you want to ship a command line app. Turns out it's a lot of work. You get to build an API, and then you have to figure out what kind of client binaries you're going to distribute. You have to figure out a way to get those running on macOS, Linux, and Windows. Once you do all that, you get to ship the API to production, and then you get to do integration testing and hope that everything works. And that is the easy part. The hard part is later on down the road where you want to make a change. You may have to change the API, potentially remove something that breaks all the other clients you have deployed out there. So you either have to make some backwards compatibility trade-offs in the server, or you have to figure out a way to deprecate the client. Lots of integration testing and lots of pain. This is what that stack looks like when you put it all together. Up top, you have the client, which is the terminal and the API client. And then on the bottom, you have your API server, authorization logic, and business logic. So Terminalwire just deletes the API client and the server, and it replaces it with standard I/O and a few other channels that I will demo. All right, so the first things first, we have this application called TinyZap, which is a link shortener that generates open graph images. So here's what it looks like from the web application today, terminalwire.com. Let's shorten that link and see what happens. So we put the link in there. It's going to take a screenshot. And there it is. We have our Terminalwire TinyZap link. Now we have a bunch of developers that want to use TinyZap in this demo, and we need to make a command line tool for them, which will be bin TinyZap. So if we run it today, we can see that we get a help command, but let's actually see what's in this binary. Great. The important thing here is we have a Terminalwire client and we connect it to this WebSocket. So there's actually not very much inside of this client. Let's see what the server looks like. We have a route over here that connects our Thor server, and we give it our command line application, which connects it to CLI, which is what this client is connecting to. Now, before we go further, you're probably wondering, what is Thor? Thor is a command line parsing tool. It's a library. Rails and Bundler uses it, and you can build it, or you can use it to build command line applications. So let's go back to our code, and let's actually take a look at what this main CLI looks like. So first thing, we probably want to implement a basic feature where we can put the version of the CLI out. And let's run this again and see if what we have to update. Oh, look at that. We didn't have to update anything. Remember, this command line application, it lives on the server. So inside of our Rails application, we have our app folder. That's all standard except for this folder we have called CLI, command line application. And we put our version feature in here, saved it, and then we ran the TinyZap client. And we can see it just picks it up right away because it streams it from the server. If we run version, we get that there. All right, the next feature we want is whenever you run TinyZap open, it just launches this URL in the browser. So again, we make the change there, we save it on the server, we run TinyZap, it picks up our new command, we run it, and there we go. It launches TinyZap from the command line. All right, next thing we need is a login feature. Now we could just have a username and password and use standard in to get that, but most web applications today actually have a lot of different ways of signing in through OAuth and things like that. So it's easier just to launch a URL that authorizes the command line application. All right, before we jump into this and run it, let's actually look at the code here and see what we're doing. Now keep in mind this is demo quality code. So we're going to be taking some shortcuts here just to demonstrate how this data moves around, not necessarily secure it. So the first thing we're going to do is generate a nonce, and we're going to pass it into this controller we have called authorizations. We're going to launch that URL, And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait for that authorization to be published to this channel. So we have a PubSub server running on Rails. It's the same thing that Action Cable uses. So it could be Redis or Postgres. Anyway, it's going to listen for the message to be published, and it actually is going to do a blocking read on that authorization. So it'll wait here, and then once that comes in, if all goes well, we should get the user ID, and then we can set that equal to current user, and we'll be logged in. All right, so we're going to clear the console, and then we're going to run tinyzap login, hit approve, and you can see that we logged in. Let's take a quick look at the authorization controller so you can see there's not a whole lot to it. So we have a form here with the submit, the approve and deny buttons. And you can see we have the messages here to authorize the client to continue using it. Where the magic happens is we publish this message to the authorization channel with the user ID. And then we pick that up from our CLI right here. Grab the user ID out of that, and then we set the current user equal to the user ID. So there's a lot of things going on here. The current user, if we look at that, we'll see whenever we set the current user equal to that, we actually open a configuration file, and then we set the user ID equal to the user ID. Now you wouldn't actually do this in production. This is just for a demo, but let's go ahead and see where that file ended up and what that looks like. And there we go. We have user ID 2. Okay, so we're going to clear the console again, and then we're going to implement the Whoami feature so that we can see who is logged in. Now if we run this, we should see the Whoami command come up again. There it is. And we get that. And just to show you how easy it is to kick a change out, we could say email address. You could deploy that, and it's immediately picked up by the client. All right, now finally, we want a way to manage our links from the command line. So we uncomment this. We have a subcommand called links CLI. So if we open this up, you can see here we have a command to create a link, and we have a command to list all the links. So let's go ahead and run the command that lists all the links, and we'll see what that does. So you can see the code here. We get the current user, we get the links from the current user, and then we list it out in a table here. So we have the web address, the URL, and the title, and we list all that out here. Now the moment of truth. Let's open up links, clear this console, and let's create a new Terminalwire link. So bin tinyzap links, create, and then terminalwire.com. And we should see this screen update. It's taking a screenshot. Looks like the link is already created. We can copy the URL here, and there it is. So if you want to learn more about Terminalwire, go to terminalwire.com. I have a little landing page there. Hit the discuss your requirements button and send me an email. I want to know what kind of project you're working on and the stack you're using. And we'll see how we can work together to get Terminalwire working on more platforms and shipping to more clients.